Some of you, I hope, will have seen some of the other recordings I've made, and these are of my mother's writings, which came to her from the other side, that's all you can say, after she'd had a real spiritual attack. And this has nothing to do with religion or my mother being some amazingly holy woman. She was just quite a normal, ordinary person who, apparently, according to the people who've come to her, had actually had an experience like this before and given a message on one of our other sister planets and been murdered for her trouble. So she's left all this amazing stuff behind. I have also been given some of this stuff, and the whole idea of making a book out of it has made me want to cry, because the difficulty of getting yourself published and getting it out there today is just so difficult and so complicated, and I don't know how one goes on with it. So Miles and I have got together and are putting this up on the internet, and hopefully it will reach quite a few people. Today I was hearing about some woman who's put her children on. They're doing nothing, they're just playing in the bath, and they're making £1 million a day. Well, I'm not so bothered about the money, but I am bothered about our humanity knowing the truth about things, because this really, no matter how you look at it, has to be the truth. And it's not a religious message at all, it's just facts about how we are. And so these are not my words, they're somebody else's words. And there's a whole other story behind it as well, about how originally it was going to be a religious message. And my mother went through all kinds of things, and that all fell to bits. And I think whoever these people are on the other side, they certainly owe her a debt. Anyway, she's no longer here for them to pay it. So I'm going to start off. I've read a lot about government and all kinds of things. So I'm going to start about something that is really important to us, which is creation and how a child is put into a body and our humanity here. So if I start off with this one, which is concerning creation. So this is just a little small bit. This is part of something my mother has written down. Religions teach everyone that God created the world, and basically they try to instill into their people a sense of order and goodness, concern for others, and in fact all of those things that are most admired and sought after by those desirous of living in a world which is well ordered and a joy to live in. One thing must be remembered about many of those things that all of the various religious leaders taught their people, was that they were sent into a totally primitive world where such things as computers, electricity, mechanical engines were not known at all, and anything that was not easily understandable would have been regarded with the deepest suspicion, fear, and perhaps the terror that it was the work of some evil monster or the devil himself. This message would have been impossible to give even 100 years ago, when computers were not known and people were not as open-minded as they are today, and ready to look at an explanation of the unknown, at least with interest, even if not with belief. Firstly, as there are always many people who believe that God created the world, what can one say about this unknown creator or entity? Who on earth is he or she? Firstly, as there are always many people who believe that God created the world, what can one say about this unknown creator or entity? What on earth is he? We who live on the other side have never seen any such being, neither an angel nor any other being other than those similar to ourselves, who are, as those of you will be reading this book, human, both men and women. Consider, therefore, some great creature of enormous size, capable of creating the universe within which the planets revolve on their automated course. Who created him in the first place? There is no end to the speculation and no answer to a deeply intelligent, thinking person. Something of greatest knowledge and understanding and power created the universe and everything that lives within it, and it must be immense. And in this book we must give the warning that it not only creates but can just as easily destroy anything or anyone that interferes with the basic master plan. because every single living thing is part of that master plan, which is all geared to creation. The first thing that everyone has to understand about all living things that belong within the master plan of creation is that everything, and we do mean everything, exists on two structures, and in fact possibly more than this in some cases. But we simple human beings can only hope to comprehend a simplistic description, or the whole complexity of creation may become confusing. For people of 100 or more years ago, this message would have been impossible to convey, as they would never have known what a computer was, or electricity, or a flying craft, or even a horseless carriage. Endlessly clever scientists discuss the universe. How was it created in the very first place? The Big Bang Theory, etc. One thing must be remembered in any understanding of the living world, and that every single thing is based on similar, and although often seem completely impossible to comprehend, absolutely similar principles. It has been truly stated that if every single living person from the dawn of time goes to paradise, then it must be extremely crowded. This is, of course, absolutely true, and everything that we are trying to explain is completely logical when it is considered carefully. A child is born of whatever race, after and only after a male sperm or orgasm contained only in the body of a man or father of the child unites with the female ovum contained only in the body of a woman, who becomes the mother of the infant. This child grows to adulthood in the normal course of its life, and when its life is over, may or may not pass on, and could become as we are, and be recruited to help to run the planet. We are therefore not born from men and women as the living are, but must have lived at some time in either your world or some other. One thing must be understood. Only in the living world can life be created, and all creatures, both human or otherwise, no matter how insignificant they might be, have two bodies: the living body that can be seen, felt and touched, and the invisible one which can live on after the old physical body is destroyed on another structure, which is in fact an integral part of the living planet. So it is that we, the non-living, can see, hear and know the living speak into their minds, run and monitor their lives for the hoped-for good of others living. So bearing in mind that all things are created in a similar way, the planet can only be created by the fusing of its basic elements in some violent way, and therefore the Big Bang creation of the universe and the creation of the planets themselves must in some way resemble the creation of man himself. And just as he has a second, or an electrical body, not spiritual, which conjures up the idea of something ethereal, gaseous, without substance, which on our structure is not so, both bodies are just as physical within their own structure, as no creature can live without a body which has no substance, any more than they could live on a cloud, which so many people imagine must be life after death. The planet, therefore, has an integral part of it, a second body or substance, on which the non-living reside, for which period it is decided they must remain there. So that's the first. And then I've got this one, the creation of mankind himself. So we'll try this one. How, children ask, are we born? Where do we come from? Gooseberry bushes and other wild ideas told to fretful children should now all completely disappear, just like the promise of paradise after death, or gone to Jesus, which unfortunately bears no possible sort of link with reality whatsoever. The Christian Bible is regarded as perhaps one of the most important messages ever given to the world, as is the Quran and other Hindu and Buddhist scriptures, which purport to speak of man rising up after death to marvellous places of pleasure and paradise, completely impossible in physical life. In another chapter, we deal at length with the Christian religion and Jesus himself, well known to those of us who dictate this book. In the beginning, a man, for a man he was and is, dressed in an elegant, seemingly blue. This was what happened to my mother in the very beginning. She was literally taken out of her body and had a long interview with this man who was wearing 17th century dress. She described him as a man whose face looked ageless, and yet he wasn't young, and he appeared to know everything about her and was a man of intense wisdom. And Several other members of my family have also seen this man. Not me, actually. So this is how this is. But he appeared as a 17th century man, because what they're saying is that all our beliefs at the moment haven't really progressed much from the 17th century. In the beginning, a man, for a man he was and is, dressed in an elegant, seemingly blue 17th century costume, appeared to the writer. And this has a very important meaning. It means that this is not in any way a religious message, but simply knowledge, a knowledge which must clear away forever the foolish superstitions of the 17th century. Everything which is now in the world is based upon the knowledge and beliefs of the 17th century, surviving until the present day, completely illogical and false. In the beginning it was God, it says in the Holy Bible, and to this day people have an impossible vision or idea of some impossibly large being clad in shining armour, to whom all prayers can be directed and hopefully answered, comforting perhaps, but untrue and false. No one, absolutely no one, can possibly come to understand what or how this fantastic universe and the people within it were conceived of in the very first place, or whether there are other universes, even more fantastic in size and concept, to which we shall all go when we have reached the ultimate of our development. And this perhaps must be the nearest thing to ultimate paradise, if there is such a thing that can be possibly imagined. No one being could possibly rule or create this vast universe, or even this one small planet. No one. In the beginning, then, what is there? A lonely God busily churning out his little people because he was lonely and needed somebody to watch over. This is the basic idea of many people and most religious people. In the beginning is a fantastic mass of fire, of power, which in the ultimate produces rocks and a whole revolving automated scheme of things, so marvellous and so complicated that it defies description. And everything, absolutely everything, works more or less on the same principle, even human beings themselves, who take many millions of years to create. Firstly, then, one has a planet ready for habitation. The fires and earthquakes have died down. The sun warms it, and gentle breezes blow over its waters, now ready and already beginning to teem with this mysterious thing, life. All life begins with water, and nothing is created on this structure without this precious fluid, which is made up of those other two basic parts of creation, oxygen and hydrogen. As all schoolboys know, H2O, oxygen in one part and hydrogen in two parts, the basis of creation. All school children listen with bored lassitude to descriptions of the first type of little creature, the amoeba. And this is the beginning, the very beginning of all life. This little creature, which in itself is amazing, who can divide and subdivide and grow as it rolls around the fluids that surround it, and gobbles up algae, which again is the beginning of plant life, green slime. Until water and green algae of all sorts and types can develop, then no life can survive on a planet. If nothing is done, it takes millions upon millions of years for a planet to slowly evolve. Simple fish types of creatures, which at times go on, become fish, slimy worms, eels, and lizards, frogs. It is lizards and frogs that slowly climb out of the slime, and in millions upon millions of years slowly become other creatures. There are also various types of insect that develop in all manner of miraculous ways, but in every case they must begin with water, like the dragonfly that spends the first part of its life in water before climbing up a plant stem and shedding its outer shell. It becomes the beautiful creature with wings that flies about in the sunlight. In the beginning, it was said to the writer by our 17th century representative that everything is like a network. Work must go on without cessation, and this is true. Part of that work is to traverse the universe and find out planets that are becoming ready for habitation, when true hard work must begin. Firstly, it must be remembered that this universe and everything within it exists on two structures at once: the physical, creative, living structure and the non-living, non-creative structure. After death, all intelligent humanity, if it does not immediately live again, exists upon the structure that we live on. The after-death, non-living structure, which looks much the same, does not, in the same way, does not eat, does not therefore excrete, and therefore does not either recreate itself or give birth. Only upon the living physical plane does mating, birth, and the whole creation of life take place. Every planet is two planets, whether it is inhabited or uninhabitable. And the other structure is where the rest planes or life after death places exist, all around the living, in such a way as to be quite invisible to the living. We do not watch the living unless it is our wish or our task to do so, when we may, if we so desire, slip into the living world. Whenever we wish and do those tasks that must be done to keep the living going, and firstly to promote life in emerging planets. What the intelligent may ask happens then, in the very beginning, when there are simply no living persons anywhere to visit an emergent planet. What then? It simply takes millions and millions of years longer. In the very beginning, there simply are only basic insects and a few small animals. Trees grow and plants grow as the insects grow, as without basic insects, the trees and flowers and plants can't grow either. When this stage has been reached, hopefully, someone on our structure hears of this new emergent planet and thereafter comes to its rescue. There are in this universe all too few planets that are inhabitable, and possibly millions that have not been found yet. A planet such as yours is very precious indeed. Given greater knowledge and help, it could become a marvellous place for everyone to live in. This is our hope for your planet. All creatures slowly grow from one life to the next, but only certain ones ever become humanity. These are the stinging insects of all types and kinds, who must stalk their prey and find ways to lay in wait, killing them instantly, and in this way developing a simple basic intellect. Perhaps this is the saddest thing about creation as far as man is concerned. It is based entirely upon violence, without which mankind as an intelligent, thinking, calculating being simply could not exist at all. This is the truth about humanity. All little basic creatures, fish, insects, birds, exist like man upon two structures at once. That is to say that in the creation of life, two bodies, one inside the other, are formed, which is not the entity or soul. This is something indestructible, whereas the two bodies based upon electricity, like everything else that is living, are destructible. All simple creatures live, eat each other in such a way that the creature, when it dies, hardly knows what has happened to it, and is born again in yet another egg cell of some sort to take its place in the scheme and order of things. All creatures must not only die when their span is over, but their bodies must be so created that they are disposed of cleanly and forever, leaving no waste and no mess. This is the only way that the physical world can remain as unpolluted as possible, at least in the very beginning, before mankind rises up to pollute it in all manner of different ways. Eventually you get to the small four-footed creature, which has in many millions and millions of years mutated from some simple insect or frog. The frog is the most often the beginning of a long chain of various types of humanity, having 4 legs and 2 eyes and a mouth, placed vaguely in the same sequence as humanity. Only the best survives to go forward to a better life. Only the most intelligent of millions ever become yet another slightly more intelligent creature, until you get to the ape or monkey in all his different forms, and it is the ape or monkey who is the very beginning of man himself. The knowledge we are giving is simple and basic. There simply is no point in trying to explain to ordinary people the complicated mechanics of creation, which some of which are so mysterious as to be unknown and unfathomable in any case. If a planet is not found, then it cannot mutate beyond a certain point. The most important and boring work that must be done in this searching for an emergent planet for future colonization. It can take several hundred of years of travelling around the heavens by living people on our structure to find a living planet ready for the important work that must go on century after century to bring any planet to life. Everything works on a computerized basis, and all entities or souls must pass through an extremely complicated computer in such a way that their future life or lives are decided. Vast, complicated laboratories have to be set up, and someone with great knowledge has to run them. These people must be those on our structure who may live for any period up to 2,000 or 3,000 years, given help and continual boosts of life force, which is the same both for the physical living and those of us who live on the other structure or non-physical life. The whole basis of life is reincarnation. Without that, no life would be possible. The whole basis of life for humanity is constant change. Humanity and even animals quickly become bored if there is not constant stimulus, which makes the ancient concept of heaven absolutely absurd. No one could possibly sit around in ultimate light strumming some sort of musical instrument indefinitely and remain happy. It simply is not a feasible proposition at all. Intelligent humanity needs to work, and the more advanced he becomes, the more complicated the work that he is able to perform. Tissue which creates life is now being frozen and implanted into host mothers with some success, and people take this fact for granted. This is the basic way that in the very beginning intelligent people must be brought to life to help to create a living planet. It is possible to take tissue from a living person, a sperm from a man, or a very many or several ovum from a woman who will be required to live again, either in her home planet or transferred to another, possibly millions of miles away, on the other side of this universe. In the very beginning, simple ape man must be created, and this means sperm from the black, brown, or even white and yellow people from some other part of the universe, where the humanity is exactly the same as yours is. All people must begin in one or other of the coloured races, whose sole function in life is to tend their animals, roam over wide plains of earth. All mankind, of whatever race, exists in the clan system and becomes extremely unhappy. And this is something actually that has made me really quite annoyed. You see all these so-called celebrities going off to, the Mongol steppes or whatever, and talking to these people who are living very basic lives, obviously, but living lives that make them happy. They're all together with their families, and they're living the lives that are suited for them. And you get people like Kate Humble saying, "Oh, but, isn't it awful that you're not going to university?" Half of the people who go to university in our country and in the Western world end up with a lot of debt and a job, no job, in fact, with a qualification that doesn't fit them for anything. We should leave these people, we should help them as much as we can, if when it needs be, but let them live their lives the way they're supposed to live them. Anyway, I'll stop ranting on and go back to this. So all people must begin in one or another of the coloured races, whose sole function in life is to tend their animals and roam over the wide plains of the earth. All mankind, of whatever race, exists in the clan system and becomes extremely unhappy left alone. Humanity belongs in families, and this is the most important piece of knowledge that human beings of all sorts must come to understand and remember. Once the family clan system breaks down, then humanity turns to all sorts of dreadful self-destructive pursuits and becomes dreadfully unhappy. And that's happening very much in the Western world. We look back on our grandparents and great-grandparents who had huge families, but we don't know any of them. Some people feel they have no family at all. Simple tribes of people are the very beginning for all humanity. All people pass through some sort of animal, or many. There are the lynx types of people, or the cat people. There are many to be found in those of the Chinese races or Oriental races. And in fact, when I lived in Singapore, they used to break the cat's tail because they believed that the cat was more perfect and would have a better chance of going to heaven. How easy it is to see that their features do resemble a cat type of face. There are also monkeys of one sort or another who have this slanted eye type of feature and are very agile and belong in the feline group of creature. The feline group of creature. Anyway, there are those who have passed through the dog, the lion and the monkey that has the dog type of feature, the dog monkey. There are, I think, baboons look very dog-like. There are horse people, and always, even when they have reached the ultimate of intelligence, they will always feel a great affinity with horses, and the horse with them. There are within the human races of this planet, and all others, all different types of people, and all these relate to the animals from which they have sprung, many millions of years before. In the very ultimate, there must be the most intelligent of white men, and this is something which is very politically incorrect at the moment. But who invents everything, one has to say. In the very ultimate, there must be the most intelligent of white men set to rule, and hopefully, when complete development is reached, to keep the peace between all nations. And the history of our white nations have not been very edifying. To keep the peace between all nations and to try to create a beautiful world for all races, all too rarely for a very large variety of reasons. This is never achieved, and humanity destroys itself. All life is based on violence, and all too often mankind in his ignorance turns to war to subdue a troublesome neighbour, not only to steal his wealth and promote his own, not only because unfortunately mankind all too often, having been created through violence, enjoys it and seems to need to alleviate the boredom, but because with a rising population, economies of countries become so complicated that no one knows exactly what to do to stop absolute chaos. Only certain people of all races ever become intelligent enough to rule, and they are all too few and very precious, much sought after throughout the universe. All people of all races must live many humble, simple lives, doing menial, simple tasks before they have acquired the basis for something better and more advanced. Not everyone can do that. Many never progress very far, and are happiest tending their farm animals or growing simple crops within the bosom of their intimate families. That is the simple happiness for ordinary people who make up the basis of all races. Some sorts of races really should never be expected to work very much. Simple village life is all that they are suited to. Fishing if they live near the sea. They live and they die, bring up their children in a communal way, and are most often reincarnated back into their family clans where they can be happy for hundreds of years, unless they are chosen to move on, change colour and start on an entirely new, slow climb of growth in intellect. The tragedy of mankind in this planet is that no message of any importance whatsoever has ever been given to it. The taking of slaves, which is brought about by man's wickedness and greed, has gone on for thousands of years, long before Christ came and gave his message, or any of the major prophets for this world. Simple people who ought to have been left alone were too ignorant and unwary to realize that without some sort of protection, they are simply terribly vulnerable and would be seized. Whole families, wives, husbands, children, everyone, throughout the Mediterranean areas of this world, black men in the coastal regions of Africa, beaten unmercifully and taken away to a strange land, to work until they dropped for a cruel master who did not care that they had lost the only thing that humanity exists for, his family. This has meant one of the many ways that races have become mixed up in some places so hopelessly that the original people who must have lived there long ago have disappeared altogether. Race in all its various types and colours does not exist simply as some haphazard scheme of nature. It is all part of the basic plan of humanity. Everyone must pass through some sort of type of coloured race before he becomes in the end a white man. If in ignorance all the races become hopelessly mucked up, and I'm afraid I've lost the rest of it. But you can see this happening now. We're getting increasingly worried about the number of people who are developing cancers, diabetes, heart trouble, blood problems, all these different things. And this is because people of such varying electrical frequencies are marrying each other, and varying blood groups. There are now more than 50 different blood groups. And it's these days, if you talk about it at all, you're immediately told you're racist, which is such an ignorant thing to say. Every single one of our races is precious. Why should it be better for a black man to marry a white woman and then have a coloured child who fits nowhere and becomes ill because he has a body that doesn't work properly? Some of the worst problems are coming from the Vikings, and the fact that the Vikings moved all over the world with their trading. They were very marvellous farmers, artisans, traders, family men, very fierce warriors, and also very enthusiastic slavers. And they have left their rhesus negative blood all over the place. And rhesus negative blood is fine if it's within your own family tribe. But then you marry someone else, and the north of England, all over Europe, all over Russia, there are places, I think the Basques, I think 60% of the Basque people are rhesus negative. They've even got to Newfoundland. I think even some of them have ended up in India. And with rhesus negative blood, you tend to get very low blood pressure, very low heart rate. And that's fine if you are within your family unit and you're all rhesus negative and you're meant to have that blood group and that blood type. But you are now finding, say in my childhood, we didn't know about the anti-D. So a woman with rhesus negative blood would have a child by a rhesus positive man, neither of them really being aware of their blood group. And then the mother's rhesus negative blood would pass across the placenta and possibly kill or maim the child that she was carrying. So consequently, in places like Derbyshire, in fact, 66% of this country have some Viking blood, apparently. And we're all quite proud of it. However, in my family, my younger sister has the rhesus negative, and I've got the traits, which is the rather thready heart rate, low blood pressure, or at least it was. Now it fluctuates very much because I've got obviously some body systems that should run on a low blood pressure and some on a higher. It makes for fatness, which is very uncomfortable. And also I've got 6 lumbar vertebrae, which is another thing which sort of tends to come with rhesus negative blood. So we're now such a mix-up all over the place that it is causing a lot of sickness. You're seeing some of these really awful programs that one sees on Channel 4 and Channel 5, you know, about the woman with the 60-stone legs, you know, the man who weighs 100, you know, all this ridiculous stuff. But, you know, this is really appalling for somebody to be that huge. And you don't get like that from just eating. You get like that from the most disastrous combination of genealogy, which is nothing to do with you, is it really? It's a series of people who marry someone who they've met, not somebody because they're passionately in love with them, and have a child that really is not well. And a lot of European people now are, in my family, there are 3 girls, we're all reasonably good looking and intelligent, and only one of us has had some children. So, you know, obviously my genealogy and my middle sister, who had a lot of eczema and one thing and another, was not something that somebody, you know, on the other side wanted us to pass on. So consequently, we've done other things in life. And this is so of so many people now in the Western world. So that's that one, Miles, so we can finish that.